My name's Ryan Carnie. I'm from southeast Queensland. I'm a sculpture artist. I'm very close to finishing the biggest sculpture I've made, an Angus bull with his foot up on a globe for Stanbroke. When I was quite young, I worked for a good friend of ours up north of Hughenden on a cattle property. His station was called Clyde Park, and he was an old-timer. He loved blacksmithing and all the old trades, and so did I. So we had a good friendship, and after he passed away in 2016, that's when I started making all these small items. I went, it's a great name. I love the place, and it always felt like home to me, so yeah. I've probably always admired sculpture. I haven't been a huge fan of the scrap metal art. I thought I'd try something different. It is a little bit different to a lot of artists. I made a bull head sculpture. I got asked by Brangus Australia if I'd take it up to Beef Week at Rockhampton. Felt very privileged to have that up there and had it in their tent. I took some brochures and popped around to see as many people as I could, and Stanbroke was there. I popped in and gave them a brochure, and I remember telling them if they weren't interested, they could use the brochure to light their fire. They had a bit of a giggle. Anyway, I was stoked when I got an email from them inquiring about it, and then this is what they come up with, which I was pretty stoked. They started with a couple of different concepts. It was almost a cartoon photo that they sent through of very similar to what we've built. Because I've made quite a few smaller heads, I had a bit of a system with a starting point. Where it got tricky is once I got to the bottom of the neck, there were days that were daunting, but I bite off more than I can chew and chew like mad. A typical day in the workshop for me starts off looking at photos and sitting on the chair for longer than I should, looking at the project, trying to work out where to start. I think the hardest thing about doing this project is starting, just the first piece. The process starts with cutting a cardboard template or a pattern. Once I've got that to the right shape, I'll transfer that onto a sheet of steel, trace around that, cut that out, whether it's a grinder or a plasma cutter, clean up the cuts where I need to, transfer that back to the sculpture, tack it on. Often I've got to shape that first, or sometimes I'll shape it on the bull. I use a lot of clamps, which is tricky because often the pieces are big, so I use all sorts of straps and clamps and bolts and screws and all sorts of things to get the piece in the position I need it before I weld it. Initially I wanted to build an inner frame out of rod, which I did. I started to do that, but it was taking a lot more time than I wanted it to, so I ended up just using a steel sheet frame that was welded inside, and then I wrapped the finished steel around that. Some areas on the bull, once I had an area finished, if it was thicker than it needed to be, well, I'd heat it up and hammer it in, which also gives it a texture and a look where muscles would often move, so that's helped give it more character. There is trial and error. I stand back a lot and look at it from a distance and walk around it, and I've built the sculpture on a wheeled frame so I can turn it around and look at it a lot from different angles. When I was about 13, we lived down the road from a whip maker, and I had a broken whip, and my dad took me down to see this old guy, and Max Willoughby was his name. I'm sure people have heard of him. Instead of fixing the whip for me, he said, if you've got the time, sit down and I'll show you how to fix it. And that started something big for me, because I realised I love creating, and I think I always wanted to make bigger sculptures, but it's had its days where self-doubt started creeping in, but I'm wrapped with where I'm at with it now. I think where self-doubt would start is I'd come up and look at a million photos of Angus bulls, and if I started something and had to cut it all off, some days I'd be like, can I finish this? I hope I can. I've committed to it. I have to finish it. I didn't have anyone I could ring to ask, so there's no one I could say, if I'm struggling with it, can you come and help me? Some days I'd have to just pack it up, and then the next day I'd come up and it was usually clearer the next morning after a break. I've used a vinegar solution to get an even rust look all over the bull. Then it'll be lightly brushed back before it's sealed with a external lacquer that I use. Stanbroke are taking the sculpture down to their main office near Grantham. They've got a meatworks facility down there, and they want a photo opportunity for their customers and just to make the front entrance of their office more appealing. So they're spending a lot of time and effort doing all the landscaping in this sculpture with a centrepiece, which I'm excited to be part of. They wanted a powerful bull, and that's kind of what I've been working on. I love the sculpture. It's obviously the biggest piece I've ever made, and it's by far the best.